So when talking about carry guns, the question often arises, just how much do you have to spend to get a solid carry gun? Well, today I'm going to help you with that answer. We're going to be comparing the tried and true Glock 19 versus the Canik TP9 SF Elite. Let's get to work. Work here. Welcome back to Work the Trigger. So when we're looking at carry guns, and I get a lot of questions about this, how much do you have to spend in order to get a solid carry gun? There's a lot of different answers to that question. And when it comes down to it, there's really a lot of mid-line, like mid-end stuff that you can go, but there's really only one when we're talking about affordable carry options that I will readily suggest. And that one is the Canik TP9 SF Elite. The TP9 SF Elite is, it's actually based on a Walther design. It's part of the TP line, and it has, in my opinion, one of the best striker fire triggers on the market. They come for like $350 to $400, somewhere in that range. You used to be able to find them down under $350, but I haven't seen that sale in quite a while. But let's talk a little bit about the comparison between the TP9 SF Elite and kind of the tried and true go-to, the Glock 19. So both of these guns have about 4-inch barrels, but in overall size comparison between these two guns, they are pretty darn close. The 19 is in its form right here, just a little bit shorter, which means that in its assembled form it will be shorter too, because neither one of these guns have flush fit mags. The mags do stick out on both of these. So the Canik's gonna end up being about 1/8 of an inch bigger. Now, features of the Canik, we've got both front and rear cocking serrations. The sights on the Canik are honestly some of the best stock sights that you're gonna find on a carry gun. We're looking at Warren Tactical fiber optic front and a blacked out rear. They are really well proportioned. You got a thinner front, a good sized notch in the back, giving you a really good sight picture, and a nice sharp ledge on the back to be able to get that equal height thing going. Working down from there, we do have an ambidextrous slide stop side release. We've got a swappable magazine release, and again, one of the best striker fired triggers available on the market right now. The overall feel and fit of the Canik, so I'm gonna be honest with you, the Canik guys really hate when I say this, but the Canik feels its price range. The Caniks come in, again, right about that $350 mark, which is $200 less than a lot of the other options, and you can feel it. It just feels somewhat budget. The grip and the texturing feels what I like to call generic. I've said cheap before. I'm not sure cheap is the right word. It feels generic. You give me a Glock and I'm going to be able to tell that that's a Glock if I'm blindfolded. You give me a P10 and I'm blindfolded, and I'm going to be able to tell that that's a P10. The Canik, I'm not 100% sure I'd be able to tell it's a Canik. The grip texturing on the sides is, it's got these textured little panels in here, but they don't offer a lot. That's okay because the majority of the grip texturing on pistols comes from the front and back. On the front and the back, they have these rounded nubs. They help a little bit, but again, not a lot. The polymer feel, the polymer texturing on them just feels a little bit unrefined and generic. Now, that being said, the feel of it just in general isn't going to affect your shooting. The texturing may affect your shooting, depending on how much you rely on the texturing, and it will definitely affect your shooting if you're relying on them for like a wet situation, if you're looking at water, or in a like worst case scenario, blood. These things are going to get a little bit slick. So let's take a couple of shots through the Canik. We'll talk a little bit about how it shoots, then we'll swap over to the Glock. Alright, so in general, the Canik shoots pretty well. It does have a little bit more reciprocating mass, a little bit higher bore axis, so you do feel the recoil impulse a little more with the Canik than you do with some of the other guns like the Glock 19 or the P10C. That being said, these awesome sights on here do help you bring everything back centered. You're going to end up probably shooting these stock sights better than you would like the stock base model Glock sights. Now, my Glock's got the AmeriGlow sights on them, which is going to help. It's got another thing gun to it, which I'll tell you about here in just a minute, which I've already said that the TP9 here has one of the best triggers on the market. And so the Glock does have a trigger in it. I'll explain that in a little bit. But the trigger profile of the Canik here is it's pretty darn awesome. So we've got a bit of a take-up on there, which isn't a big deal. The majority of the striker guns are going to have a lot of take-up. It's a safety feature, especially with that safety tab in there. You want enough space so that safety tab has to really be retracted and pulled more intentionally. After that, you hit a little bit of resistance, and that little bit of resistance goes for about 1/8 of an inch, and then you hit a hard wall and a brake. Now I use the term hard wall very loosely because this brake on this thing is like 3.5 pounds, but it is a definite wall and a definite brake. Reset on this thing is extremely audible, extremely tactile, and it's that same distance of the brake, which is again about like 1/8 of an inch. This trigger is super short in this thing. I always say that a trigger this good doesn't belong in a gun this price, and I use that kind of jokingly, but this is an amazing trigger for a striker fire gun, especially in a gun that's coming in right around $350 to $400. Let's swap over to the Glock 19 and talk about some of the features on that. So now we've got the Glock 19 out. Glock 19, again, we got about that 4-inch barrel. We got front and rear cocking serrations because this is a Gen 5 Glock 19, one of the newer ones without that half moon cut. I actually traded off my half moon 19 because I hated that thing. The early 19s had like a cutout down here to be able to strip the mag with. It was dumb. Anyway, other features of the Glock 19, again, we do have ambidextrous slide-stop slide release, a swappable mag release. The 19 actually comes with a flared mag well integrated into it, gives you a little bit easier magazine changes. The Canik doesn't have that. It is a pretty narrow magazine well, which can affect reloads under duress. The stock Glock sights, like the base model Glock sights, are plastic, but the fact that they're plastic and extremely weak just takes that whole thing and kind of trashes the base model versions. You basically have to upgrade the sights if you're going to carry it and expect it to be reliable. The sights also have a habit of drifting themselves out. Not only that, the profile, although it is an okay profile, it's still not as good as the War and Tactical profile on the Canik. The Canik just has better sights. Down into the grip texturing and the grip of the gun. The grip of the gun, the Glock does have that different grip angle, but the Canik has a Walther-shaped grip, which sounds weird, but there's something that Walther does between the flaring of their beaver tail and the angle of their grip that throws off your standard aim just a little bit. So you do, in order to comfortably, reliably use like a Canik or a Walther, you either have to alter your grip or it's going to take a little bit of adjustment after you shoot something like a Glock or one of the like standard guns. The grip texturing on the Glock is quite a bit better than the Canik. As I said, the Canik is kind of generic. The Glock, you know what it is, and the grip texturing, although not nearly the best on the market, is at least acceptable. It's better than like the Gen 3 Glocks. It's about the same as a Gen 4 Glock. They do get rid of the finger grooves, but that flared magwell also kind of locks your hand in there, gives you a nice little perch on the gun, and again, the grip texturing is better than the Canik, so you get a little bit better of a grip in there. One thing I did want to bring up really quick is the size of our trigger guard here. So the Glock trigger guard is generally, it's big enough for like a thin gloved hand, but you're not going to be able to fit like a big fluffy gloved finger through here, and it's an okay size. The Canik trigger guard is like comically big. It's just absolutely huge. You can fit, like, you can wear like the puffiest of gloves and you're going to be able to get your finger in there and you're going to be able to fire the Canik. One thing about the Canik, even though it's got this gigantor slide on here, the cocking serrations in the front are small enough that you've really got to grab down far on the slide to be able to use them. And I've missed more racks with the back cocking serrations on my Canik than I have with my tiny slide CZ. So that can be trained away. I don't train with the Canik a lot. I just shoot it every once in a while. But that is something to kind of, you'll have to get used to that on the Canik. The serrations, although they do have them front and rear, not the best serrations. Glock and its wider serrations definitely give you a little bit more to work with there. Because they do actually go all the way up the slide, so you don't have to perfect your grip quite as much to grab them. It's much more of a, in general, to whom it may concern grip to be able to rack one of these. So let's shoot the Glock really quick, and then we'll compare the shooting profile of the two. Okay, one thing I did want to talk about really quick before we talk about the shooting profile of the two. Stock Glock triggers. So first of all, these are the stock Glock sights. This is my Glock 45. Stock Glock sights, plastic. They've got that like stupid U in the back. They're just dumb. Glock, get your crap together. Anyway, the stock Glock trigger is extremely heavy comparatively. They're like usually between about like 5.5 and 7 pounds. They vary drastically, like way more than the Canik triggers do. But you've got a heavy pull, a mushy wall, and then you've got like a heavier brake. The one thing that Glock kind of does right is Their reset is pretty good, but generally speaking, Glock triggers are acceptable at best. The Canik trigger is just downright amazing. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna toss a mag in each one of these, and I'm going to bounce back and forth shooting them to give you guys an idea of how each one of them actually fires. We got the Canik and the 19. First, we'll take a couple of shots through the Canik, and now the 19. Okay, so as I said earlier, the Canik definitely recoils more. It's got more muzzle lift when you're firing it. It's not like dramatic, like gonna change your life recoil impulse, but it also is noticeable. You do notice the recoil impulse is different. Again, the aim of the Canik is off a little bit. I can pick up a Glock, and it's not the grip angle, because like I normally shoot CZs, and I can pick up a Glock and my aim can be on. The Canik doesn't fall that way. Again, it uses the kind of weird grip style that Walther does, and you do have to adjust or get used to a little bit. So it's harder for me to bounce back and forth between like a different gun model and the TP9 than it is a different gun model and the Glock. That being said, again, the sights on the TP9 are just so good that it really does help a lot. If you put these sights on like a Glock, it would be hands down the Glock by a mile. But now it's like a 5-car length, the Glock thing, because the sights and the trigger on the TP9 are so good, they almost make up for the increased recoil, almost. So I will say that in addition to that, the grip texturing of the TP9 definitely puts you at a disadvantage versus the Glock. The Glock will stay in your hand better with less grip. Now, again, that might be the increased recoil impulse of the TP9, but with more recoil impulse, grip texturing and grip dynamics matter so much more. So you're less likely to get away with slop on a TP9 than you are with a Glock. Now, you can say, oh, well, you should just train more, yada, yada, but as I've said before, any advantage you can get might be worth it. So just the advantage of starting from a better base with a Glock might be worth that extra money for you versus the TP9. So with all of that being said, the last thing I wanted to cover is aftermarket support for these two guns. The Glock is akin to like an adult Lego set. You can replace almost anything on a Glock with aftermarket stuff. They cater to their aftermarket greatly by basically like stock putting out a gun with like mediocre aspects and then giving you the ability to upgrade everything. The Canik, on the other hand, it is just because it's lower volume, lower interest, newer gun, doesn't have nearly the aftermarket on it. Now, similar to some other guns, they do give you the better things out of the box, better sights, better trigger, but you're not going to have quite the adjustability and customization options as you do with a Glock. In addition to that, you're not necessarily going to have the same options for things like holsters, lights, and magazines. Glock's got like 4 or 5 different companies out there making magazines for them. Canik has like a couple. You can run Canik mags. I don't know if Mechgar makes any. I tried the Walther PDP mags. They didn't fit in my particular instance. I've heard sometimes they do. I don't know. But the Canik aftermarket is definitely less than the Glock aftermarket. That being said, you can find holsters for both of these guns over at harrysholsters.com. I personally carry a Harry's Holsters Singleton. This is one of, if not the most comfortable holster that is available. It's definitely the most comfortable holster that I have ever used. I can pretty much do whatever I want with this holster on. I've ridden bikes, I've played football, I've played dodgeball, basketball, all of these things kind of impromptu without being able to disarm, and it stays in place and it practically disappears when you're wearing it. Again, one of the most comfortable holsters. Little caveat, I do help design them, but that being said, the fact that I help design them, I can tell you just how much time and perfection Harrison puts into these designs. It is an excellent holster, and if you want yours, you can head over to harrysholsters.com and use the coupon code WORKTHETRIGGER for 10% off. And that's it, guys. That is our comparison between the Canik TP9 SF Elite and the Glock 19 Gen 5. Remember, guys, if you found this video useful, do me a favor and hit like and subscribe down below. If you like what we do here on the channel and you want to help out a little bit, head over to workthetrigger.com. Over there, you can find coupon codes, affiliate codes, and a link to our Etsy store with custom 3D printed gun accessories. Remember, guys, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, get to work.